I have pretty much been a Star Wars fan for as long as I can remember, and it's become one of the most consistent pop culture interests throughout my life. I remember my local library boasting a surprisingly large, now that I think about it, selection of comics, from Batman to X-Men, and Marvel to DC Comics, and of course, books, clues in the fucking name. The reason I bring this up is because that one book and one comic always stood out to me: Death Troopers and the Star Wars Legacy comics. I think Death Troopers was probably too graphic for me as a kid, and to be honest, I wasn't the sharpest kid, so I wasn't getting through a whole book by myself. Star Wars Legacy, on the other hand, rocked my entire world. The art, Cade Skywalker cracked out over death sticks, and other things that made me feel weird. Growing up in the early 2000s, I was one of the first generations to grow up with a constant flow of Star Wars content before the Disney acquisition and subsequent sterilization of the brand. That's not to say I don't like a lot of the new Star Wars media coming out today. I will pretty much watch anything Filoni makes. I think Favreau is great, apart from the odd miss, and Andor is probably one of the most underrated Star Wars projects to come out in years. But it's undeniable that a lot of its quirkiness, character, and in some ways edge have been lost over the years as it had to be fitted into a more corporate structure. And I think this is starkly evident when you look at games like Star Wars Jedi Survivor, when it runs smoothly, which is beginning to become a real problem in gaming today for some reason. But to get back on track, the game is excellent. It has good quests, a refined Dark Souls-like combat system, great graphics, the characters are likeable, and the story keeps you hooked. I even think it does a decent job at capturing that Star Wars mysticism that Rebels was so good at. But ultimately, these games all come and go, much like the modern Battlefront games, while games like Jedi Outcast, Jedi Academy, Knights of the Old Republic, the Force Unleashed franchise, and the OG Battlefront games. Hell, even the movie tie-in games will remain in the minds of the core fanbase. And I think it's all down to the individuality all these games had stylistically and tone-wise. There wasn't a corporate multiverse that all these OG games had to adhere to, therefore allowing their creators to impart their personality into them, resulting in one of the things most AAA games are missing these days: actual unique character. And that's where the subject of today's video comes in: Star Wars Republic Commando, my favourite Star Wars FPS. Star Wars Republic Commando was released for PC and Xbox on the 28th of February 2005 by LucasArts. The game was directed by Tim Longo, the man responsible for directing Star Wars, Dark Forces and Starfighter, as well as Halo 5 Guardians. And the story was written by Ryan Kaufman, Michael Stemmel, John A. Hancock, and Justin Lambros. And I need to check the writing staff for all my gaming videos, as it was cool to see how the writers for this game branched out and found more success in other gaming franchises, like Yakuza, Telltale, and Sonic the Hedgehog, which I guess only speaks for the quality of this Star Wars game. Republic Commando was first released as a novel 5 months before the game came out, with the tie-in novel series written by Karen Traviss continuing for another 8 iterations after the game's release, before the cancellation of Imperial Commando 2. And I know I simped hard for the writing staff, but Karen Traviss is a #1 New York Times best-selling author from Portsmouth, England. And I've been to Portsmouth twice, and it was to get a ferry out of the UK and into Europe. But that's beside the point. Karen has written novels for Star Wars, Gears of War, Halo, and Batman. Fucking let's go, Karen. It's very amusing to me that this nice old English woman is writing hardcore Kyle Gamerboy content. The game was released to primarily stellar reviews, averaging around 80% with fans and critics, and was a commercial success, with a follow-up mobile game called Star Wars Republic Commando Order 66, released in August 2005. A mobile phone game in 2005. I can only fucking imagine. A proper sequel called Imperial Commando was to be made following Delta Squad as they transitioned from the Republic to the Empire, but unfortunately never made it past concept art. And it's funny as that's just the story of the Bad Batch now. And I would pay top dollar for a first-person Bad Batch shooter game. For real though, it's a shame we never got another installment of this franchise, and with the remastered version of the game releasing on Switch and PS4 back in 2021, here's hoping we get to see the Delta Squad make a comeback to the Star Wars universe, not just as a remastered game or a cameo in Clone Wars and Bad Batch, but as its own project. In fact, I think making Delta Squad the Imperial counterpart to the Bad Batch would be really cool. The last thing I wanted to mention was that they managed to get Temuera Morrison to voice Delta 38, which is sick. The rest of the clones had different voice actors and all spoke with American accents, which is weird to look back on now, but at the time, maybe they just couldn't afford to pay Temuera to play all the characters, which sounds reasonable to me. But either way, Temuera kills it and makes me wish he voiced all the troops in Clone Wars and Bad Batch. No offense to D. Bradley Baker, but Temuera brings this cadence and tone that has always frankly been missing from the clones in the animated shows. And maybe that helps the clones differentiate themselves from Jango, but man, I need to see some Temuera in live action as a clone trooper. Now, from my online research, which I'm sure is very surface level, that is pretty much everything I could find online ascertaining to the development of the game. So we can finally start getting down to the nitty-gritty of this game. War between the Confederacy of Independent Systems, or the Separatists for short, and the Galactic Republic has broken out, after 2,000 Jedi deployed to the Separatist-controlled planet of Geonosis to rescue Obi-Wan, Anakin, and Padme from the clutches of Count Dooku, a former Jedi Master, apprentice to Qui-Gon, and now Sith leader of the Separatists. I mean, if you have seen Attack of the Clones, then you know how this goes. The Jedi get wrecked and Yoda calls in the clone troopers. The battle then moves from the arena to the whole planet, starting the Battle of Geonosis, marking the first battle of the Clone Wars. And that's where the Commandos come in, an elite force of clones raised in packs of 4 and trained by Mandalorian mercenaries. While the other clones are meant for the battlefield, the Commandos are bred for stealth, infiltration, extractions and assassinations. They are the most qualified and capable clones in the Republic, well versed in every aspect of warfare. Basically, they are like the Royal Marines, and the clones are like the Navy. Yes, even ARC troopers. Rex would get mogged by a commando. Sorry, not sorry. So let's meet the lads then. You got Scorch, the goofy witty one, Fixer, the tech whiz square one, Sev, the grumpy ironic marksman, and finally Boss, the character you play as and the character voiced by Temuera. He is just basically the standard leader. And after saying all that out loud, I guess the whole squad motif/theme is very overplayed, but I don't even care. Squads are cool, and I guess regardless of how much you mess with them, they will probably always end up in a similar structure for a reason. The first mission of the game takes us to the Battle of Geonosis. While the Jedi and clones battle with the Separatists for the planet, the Delta Squad is sent to terminate Geonosian Separatist Chief Lieutenant Sun Fac, all while sabotaging a droid factory, an anti-craft bunker, and a Lucahulk-class Separatist ship. And while you're there, you might as well cop the launch codes so the clankers can't retreat. Now we jump a year in, and the boys are sent to investigate an abandoned Acclamator-class Republic assault ship. They split up and their comms are soon jammed as they find out they are sharing the ship with Trandoshan slavers and their scavenging droids who aren't really all that welcoming, to be honest. The boys link back up and destroy the jamming device, re-establishing comms with the Republic command, defeating the Trandoshans along the way. Hold up, the Separatists show up out of nowhere as they were going to buy the Acclamator ship. Lol. Either way, the lads have to defend the hangar bay from the Separatist forces while backup is on the way. And once the Separatists realise the ship's no longer for sale, they move to destroy it. So Delta Squad activates the ship's turbo lasers that, with the help of backup, destroy the Separatist battleship. Getting closer to Episode 3, Delta Squad is tasked with extracting a Wookiee chieftain Tarful, who has been enslaved in his homeland of Kashyyyk by Trandoshans. Tarful, by the way, is the chieftain from Episode 3 that helps Yoda, as well as from rebels. The lads free Tarfor and fight their way through the Trandoshan slave camps. Apparently we see Grievous's ship, but I must have completely missed that. Although I didn't miss the Magna Guards he left behind, that take 2 years to kill. Either way, the appearance of a Clanker general confirms that the Trandoshans and Separatists are fully linked up, meaning they must be destroyed, which is exactly what they did to a Trandoshan supply depot. After this, they move through the city of Kachiro and start the Battle of Kashyyyk, battling their way through waves of Clankers. The lads split up to man 4 anti-aircraft turrets, taking down a Separatist destroyer above the city. After this, the lads are told to regroup and retreat. However, Sev is under heavy fire before his comms cut out. The boys are ready to go rescue their brother-in-arms before being told to retreat immediately. Yoda debriefs the now 3-man Delta Squad before they are sent on another mission, with the squad not even being allowed to grieve the loss of their brother before reliving the horrors of war all over again. And that's the end. Now, to be honest, when I was actually playing this game, I barely took any notice of the story, which I think is fine. With games like these, the story is meant more to complement the gameplay than the other way around, or to create this lore and dialogue-packed RPG experience. And personally, I really like the less witty and mystical, and more toned down and gritty style of this game, given the characters, and felt more comparable to war movies like Saving Private Ryan. And the death of Sev at the end does hit. He doesn't go out in a blaze of glory or hold off the enemies from his brothers, but his comms just cut out and you have to leave before you can save him, ending the game on a very sour, somber note that feels true to the experience of the clone troopers. I mean, apart from the literal Order 66 mission, which given the game came out before Episode 3 would be rather odd, you can't really ask for much more. So the gameplay is fairly simple, so I won't take ages talking about it. At the end of the day, it's a mid-2000s first-person shooter, with some squad-based game mechanics and cool design choices, that, in all due fairness, do add a bit of quirkiness to the gameplay that I think is needed. The heads-up display shows the visor view much like Metroid Prime, and I love this touch and wish it was used way more. It just adds a bit of extra colour and dynamicness to what could otherwise look like a bit of a grey and red FPS soup. And I think this game, as well as Metroid, manages to do so without losing the serious tone either, so I really don't know why Call of Duty hasn't tried this yet, but whatever. For the squad mechanics, you can order team members to take cover and firing positions, set explosives, splice doors, hack terminals, and revive teammates. And to be honest, I wouldn't say it was gimmicky as much as it was underutilized for the most part. I just ordered troops to revive other troops or set explosives while I defended them. I mean, it served its purpose and didn't disappoint, but it didn't really blow me away either. For the guns, you have a standard DC-17 hand blaster that can be configured into a sniper rifle and assault rifle. You can also use weapons dropped by enemies, which in my opinion was always the way to go when you can. At face value, this game really isn't anything special. It has a fairly basic plot, simply following the Clone Wars through various battles. The gameplay is also pretty standard for FPS games apart from a few gimmicky mechanics. The characters themselves even follow a classic B-team squad setup, but to be honest that doesn't have to be a bad thing. I think as Star Wars fans we are used to everything being jam-packed with lore and Easter eggs, so it's kind of refreshing to see a completely self-contained story. The plot and characters served the actual game itself and just gave enough info to give the gameplay context, and nothing more, which you gotta respect. But to get back to the point made at the beginning of this video, this game had character. This is evident in the UI design, even if it was heavily inspired by Metroid. And perhaps I'm making a bigger deal out of these little things, but with how generic shooters are in general, things like your helmet having a windscreen wiper is a quirky little bit that adds some much needed comedy. Also, the soundtrack for this game actually slaps. The entire soundtrack is just Duel of the Fates on crack. To finish this review off, once you complete the game, you get access to some post-game content, like this really cool behind-the-scenes mini-documentary with some of the game devs, showing early concept art and game footage, which I'm a sucker for. Also this weird song and music video from a band called Ash, with clips of Republic Commando spliced in called Clones. And it was the most early 2000s shit ever. At the end of the day, you don't need $1 billion plus budget, or thousands of game devs shoved in an office. Sometimes all you need is a good idea and some character.